Donald Trump clearly sees his golden opportunity when it comes to dealing with Canada, especially after his recent $13 billion win that we just saw. If things do not turn around for Canada, Canada is cooked, but we are finally seeing a little bit of truth start to leak through on the mainstream media, and we have experts who are calling out things that need to be said, and Canada has to take accountability. Speaking of truth and accountability, I'll actually be calling out one of Canada's top real estate voices today, and this is actually an issue connected to America as well. Something I've argued a few times with some Americans, and this has to be called out or both countries will continue to struggle with housing costs. And it's not just the housing costs that we're seeing connected to this. Canada just had some insane doctor walkouts from some hospitals that said they will not deal with the demand anymore, and they are feeling the pressure. It's getting unsafe inside of Canadian hospitals. But we do have an actual piece of good news today, something I never thought I would see. It was very exciting and perhaps a good trend. There's a lot to talk about in today's video, so let's get into it. Quick update with the Stellantis story, because the government is talking about suing Stellantis, and we'll see if that happens. But another thing that we're seeing, which again, the shift in tone and why Donald Trump keeps winning here, is more stories continue to come out that trickle in of, hey, maybe we should deal with Donald Trump. Maybe dialogue works. Maybe we shouldn't be fighting back. But here's this quick update here.
Good morning, Prime Minister. What's your message to Stellantis?
Good morning. I've already given a statement on it.
The Prime Minister not saying much on camera after Donald Trump got what he wants, with Stellantis moving some Canadian production to the U.S. But Ontario's Premier didn't hold back.
That guy, President Trump, he's a real piece of work.
Doug Ford calling Trump a tyrant.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs.
And using Ronald Reagan's famous words in a new $75 million U.S. ad campaign.
Canada, we're a sovereign country, but we will be using American history to try and prove our point on why you should keep dealing with us, America.
Jobs and growth are at stake.
Ford said he's meeting with Mark Carney on Thursday to tell him it's time to fire back at Trump, who's making him nuts.
He drives me absolutely crazy. He does. And we aren't going to roll over. I'm not going to let him roll over Ontario, I'll tell you that.
Unfortunately, it looks like we will be doing that.
It's completely unacceptable. So we will fight for these jobs.
Canada's industry minister taking aim at Stellantis instead.
150,000 cars made by Stellantis are sold every year in Canada. And so Canadians know what to do when a company doesn't necessarily have the interests of Canadians at stake.
Jolie sent this letter to the company's CEO.
She is right, and I think that's fine. If you want to do somewhat of a domestic boycott, hey, Stellantis, the corporation, if you're not going to invest in Canada, we're not going to invest in your products. And I think that's fair, because a lot of the things that are also getting lost in translation here is a lot of these decisions are corporate decisions. The corporations don't care about your community in America. They don't care about your community in Canada. In no way do they actually care. That's why they shuffle. They're just chasing profit. Say whatever you want, boycott whatever you want when it comes to the actual corporation standards, but it just don't turn it into an anti-America thing.
CEO threatening legal action, writing Stellantis has received billions of dollars in financial support over the decades and agreed to maintain its full Canadian footprint.
These companies making decisions to cower to the White House. Let's make sure that they understand that there are real consequences.
In a press release, the White House claiming the automaker's $13 billion investment as a victory and example of America's manufacturing sector surging.
It's also made us very rich.
Trump aggressively defended his tariffs and says he's considering attending a Supreme Court hearing on their legality, looking for a win.
If we do, we're going to be the most powerful economic country in the world.
Well, to be fair, the U.S. already is the most powerful economic country in the world. That being said, imagine Fortress America if U.S. and Canada were to work together, which might be happening, because in the next clip, which shows how little leverage Canada actually has in the negotiations. But that's not a bad thing, because it's giving Canada the opportunity to pivot and rebuild, and it could be huge. But we'll be calling out that other real estate guy, because people like him and that mindset are holding us back by lying. But here's Carney's interesting change of tone.
We start from a position where we have a better deal than any other country in the world with the United States. 85% of our trade is free.
Qualifies to be free.
With the exception of Mexico, which has significant free trade with the United States, the deals the Americans have signed with everyone else has tariffs on the core of the trade, and then higher tariffs on the strategic sectors. So we're starting.
So Mexico's kind of crashing
from this stronger position. But we're also very acutely aware and very focused on the fact that we can make it better. And so we will do everything we can to make it better. There's times to hit back and there's times to talk, and right now is the time to talk.
It's so funny that he says there's times to hit back, there's times to talk, right now is the time to talk. Why did you wait 10 months? Why did you let Canada limp along? You know, it's been happening for a decade, but the last 10 months for us to not get a deal, there to be no substantial changes, and now that we've lost all of the leverage, Canadians are struggling, corporations are fleeing down to the US, now it's like, you know what? Let's open a dialogue. It's because Canada clearly lost the negotiation. It was never a trade war. It was a trade tantrum in the corner for Canada because they didn't like what the US was doing. The economist they brought on calls out stuff that's been a problem for a decade, not just blaming Donald Trump, and he shows how Canada could have had leverage, but not only leverage, how we could have worked together.
So, Ian, you feel this could mark the beginning of the end for Canada's auto manufacturing industry. Why?
I do, and I don't have any dog in this hunt, don't consult with any of these parties whatsoever. I was profoundly influenced by the late brilliant visionary Sergio Marchionne, the late Windsor native, Windsor, Ontario, and the CEO of Fiat Chrysler. And he talked incessantly in the years before he very sadly passed away from cancer. He talked about the changing auto industry in the world. He said, look, it's always been capital intensive, but it's becoming much more capital intensive. The amounts are becoming gargantuan. The R&D is going through the roof because of the need for autonomous vehicles and EVs.
EVs, obviously, first of all, almost every industry leader outside of Elon Musk himself has been calling out EVs. Like he said, it is the beginning of the end of Canada's auto sector, but Canada has doubled down, especially Ontario, which is Canada's largest province, largest economy.
He actually went so far as to say the world auto market cannot support 10 giant auto companies. The market isn't big enough. They got to consolidate. So taking from that point, and you look at this, Canada can only survive if we have access to a very large market. And there's only 3 very large markets for autos. One's called China, one's Europe, and one's the US. And all 3, by the way, protect their manufacturing sector, including, most recently, the US.
That's what I always say. You can't just create a market. When we talk about diversifying markets, well, we'll trade with Europe. Europe has to protect their own market and their own manufacturing. You think they just let you just start dumping cars in there? And we don't even manufacture Canadian cars. This is why I'm so happy to see the stuff he said.
And so, unless Mr. Trump reverses his decision, and it seems unlikely based on his track record, I think that those tariffs are here to stay. If they're here to stay, those cars are not economic, and those car companies will close those plants in the months and few years ahead and close them down.
All right, let me ask you a couple of follow-up questions to that. First of all, I was thinking small countries that have what appear to be a thriving auto sector, and Sweden comes to mind. So if Sweden can have Volvo, why can't Canada have an auto manufacturer?
That's a very good point. And Sweden they have a great big market. It's called the European Union. And they sell, I've been to Europe many times, and they sell, Volvo is huge in Europe. If you go on the Autobahn, for example, you can see Volvo trucks and Volvo cars everywhere. But again, the critical...
Now imagine Canada starting a car company and then trying to access the European market and being like, don't buy the Volvo, don't buy the Volkswagen, don't buy any of these legacy brands. You got to buy Maple Auto.
Point. In any industry, especially manufacturing, where the construction costs, one plant is $5 billion, just one auto plant, and you need multiple plants to be a company. And so the amounts are so large, you need very large production runs to achieve the economies of scale to break even. So Volvo is accessing the European market with over 500 million people.
I will say Canada has all of the infrastructure. It has all of the factories. It has all of the manufacturing facilities. So that argument of like the economy of scale, it is true. But at the same time, we did just set 52 billion on fire when it came to us investing in these things. We already have the buildings. It would just be retooling. You know, it would still cost billions of dollars, but it's not going to be starting from scratch completely.
So they are doing what one must do to survive in that industry. We've only survived for the last 7 years since Autopac, when our industry was going down the tubes at the time, was doing very badly. We only survived because we did gain access to a huge market called the United States. And we had it from then until roughly 2 days ago when the president said, sorry, we're going to make those cars going forward.
Yeah. Okay. One last question. And this is why we have you on the program. As you say, you have no economic interest or political connections to any of the parties here. And the answer to this next question might make you like an unpopular guy. But
exactly.
Do you think that maybe Canada should redirect the money that it puts into the auto industry? I know there are a lot of canola farmers and softwood lumber producers, who have a great interest in your answer to this, that we should subsidize the auto industry less and put that money in other places.
Do you think we should invest in Canadian exclusive industries that we can provide to the U.S. that would have given us a leg up when it came to negotiations? Maybe if we were investing in mining, resources, other things where they'd be like, hey, we actually can buy those things from you, especially while the China negotiations have been going on. They're talking about locking out the U.S. from a lot of these products. Imagine if Canada had just been investing in them.
I've actually, Ian, come to that conclusion. I read a whole series of studies that were done before Australia exited auto manufacturing in 2017 and the post-mortems. They were done by consulting companies, by government agencies, by academics, and they were really good. They were very objective, empirical, impartial. And, the doom and gloom that people predicted that Australia was going to, collapse or decline precipitously because they exited auto manufacturing did not happen. In fact, their GDP, average income per person, which was below Canada at the time, has gone above Canada now because they pivoted to resources, just as you suggested. Now they pivoted to mining and they pivoted to all the other resources they have. And
they basically became a mining colony for China, funny enough, but it worked. I mean, they were selling the resources and here they are with better GDP per capita. You pivot to the industry where there's demand and you can be an exclusive supplier. Yeah, it turns out there's a business case there, Canada.
In our country, I argued, and I've been talking to my students about this, we don't have a comparative advantage in manufacturing. We like to think we do. I know Premier Ford says we do, but we don't have the production runs and the scale of population that Europe, China, US has. But we do have a comparative advantage in resources, in agriculture, in potash, in nuclear, in oil, in gas, in critical minerals. We're sitting on literally trillions of dollars in yet unexploited natural resources in this.
That's the other part that I wanted to keep in that he called out directly. Canada doesn't have a comparative advantage when it comes to manufacturing. There is nothing about Canada specifically that is better than the US outside of cheaper. If cheaper is removed from the equation, then they decide to move things back down to the US. That's basically it. And if we want to be competing based on price with no comparative advantage, then why would they not just move to Mexico? Because this is a truth, this is accountability we have to be ready for, or we're going to continue to see Canada fall apart with stories like this. And this story was so scary for the future of Canada, and in this entire video, they don't call out the problem.
It's been on the verge of collapsing for several years. Maternity care at Royal Inland Hospital in Kamloops. Now those fears have materialized after the entire team of OBGYNs resigned from the hospital.
They've been sounding the alarm for a long time, publicly since 2023, privately longer than that.
The resignation letter signed by all 7 OBGYNs states in part, safety issues due to a changing workload and inability to recruit have over many years pushed us to a point where without sufficient IHA and provincial support, we are unable to continue with in-hospital care.
So they are saying, and first of all, the entire OBGYN team, the entire team resigned because they said this isn't safe, our workloads are unsustainable, we can't keep up. In this entire video, it's almost 3 minutes long, and immigration is not mentioned once. We know that the demand is directly from immigration, and this will connect to America in a second, but not calling it out. When we just found out that 42% of mothers giving birth in Canada right now are foreign born. That's a pretty large increase in demand that has to do with immigration. So we need to call this out. This is scary that this hospital's losing their OBGYNs, an entire team, because we won't call out the real problem. That's why I do this. It's about calling out the real problems, which these people don't do. And I'm calling out Ron Butler yet again because his mindset that we're about to see here is why Canada and the US take so long to address their problems. And some might even say this mindset is destructive and complicit in the problems. Let's get into what he has to say here.
Let me tell you this one. I got to admit, this one is one of the most staggering real estate catastrophes that anybody ever heard about. So let me lay it out for you. All right.
So this is a staggering real estate catastrophe that the biggest one that anybody's ever heard about. You would think that the details would be important, right?
Have to change a few things, okay? Because, these people came to me in confidence. So I'm going to change, for instance, I'm going to change the part of Ontario where this happened, okay? I would change.
That's convenient. You wouldn't think it would be helpful to know the area where this problem is happening when it's one of the biggest catastrophes ever? Okay.
Some of the pricing, and I'm going to change the community group.
Changing the community group too. So the people who caused the problem, the area where the problem's happening, and any details about it because of confidentiality. Yeah, there's no other reasons, Ron. There's no reasons why you're hiding that information. You think this is the most productive and helpful way to address one of the largest real estate catastrophes that we've ever seen, that you've ever heard? Keep in mind, this is one of Canada's top real estate voices, and for context for the Americans and Canadians, this guy suffers from horrible TDS. He constantly goes off about Trump and how crazy he is and what an idiot and blah, blah, blah. And this is the guy known for calling out the problems as they are. He'll say the quiet part out loud, except when the details actually matter, except when the details would be helpful to Canada, except when this would be how we are able to catch on to trends and stop these things from happening. So he decides the most productive way is to change the area. And guess who he blames? Guess which community he decides to blame for being the problem in this situation? Yeah, it's the Irish. I doubt you would have guessed it was the Irish, but this is why I was arguing with the Americans online too, because you have to call these things out in truth. You have not done anything wrong if you have told the truth. Lying like Ron Butler did, or obfuscating if you want to be a bit more gracious to his terminology. So we got this chart from Darth Powell, and it says it was all immigrants overpaying for houses using taxpayer provided welfare. This is insane. And what was happening, and why I argued with Americans online. So I don't know if you guys know, I have a real estate background too. So when I was talking to Americans, I was like, hey guys, it actually doesn't take that much extra demand in communities if there's not that much supply to make the prices worse. And now we're seeing, as real estate prices had continued to go up, they put a ban on the non-PRs and the H-1Bs from being able to access FHA loans, which for Canadians, an FHA is the same thing as CMHC. It's a government-backed loan, so people can basically buy their first house. It's a way to access the market. But you could see this was a trend going up of non-PRs, H-1Bs. These are people who would have immigrated to the United States. So when I said to people all the time, I'm like, guys, it has to do with your immigration and the people are using this, because when two people compete for a house, you don't need 20 people for that house to sell for $30,000, $40,000 over asking, especially when you have a government-backed loan. Why would they not take the risk on this? Because they're going, hey, not my money. It's basically a welfare loan because it's being backed by the government. Americans, to their credit, are much better at calling it out, but I still had the people arguing with me online when I'm like, guys, this is a real issue. Once again, if you're speaking the truth, you have not done anything wrong. But ending on a piece of good news here, immigration checks conducted at Calgary Event Center work site. So basically, CBSA and the Calgary police are now checking people's immigration status on work sites. This is what we were seeing in the US, and it's catching a wind up here in Canada because everybody is realizing when you acknowledge the problems, unlike Ron, who wants to hide everything and just blame Trump, they said during these raids, they were targeting the South Asian community because that's where a lot of the fraud has been found. In the story, they say they made everybody line up and a ton of people didn't come back from lunch because they were caught being there illegally, working illegally. What does that do to local wages? What does that do to the community, especially since those people are the ones who remit the most amount outside of Canada, outside of the US? Yes, it is economically destructive. It is destructive to wages. The only one who wins is the companies, and the local Americans, the local Canadians suffer. Essentially an ICE-style crackdown that we've never seen in Canada, and perhaps some hope for the future Canadians. As we can see, Donald Trump and his administration continue to stack wins at the expense of Canada, but it doesn't have to be that way. If Canada decided to pivot, like we saw in the interview earlier in this video, we could become a large partner for the United States and supply things that they need in a valuable way where both countries win. It would be absolutely awesome. And for the 100th time, call out problems by name. You're not doing anything wrong. But if you made it this far in the video, you absolutely rock. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're trying to get these videos out in front of more people. We are trying to grow the channel. If you want to support the channel, you can do it through the link down below. You can do it through YouTube directly. Like I said, working on some stuff so I can try and get an editor, get some more videos for you guys. But thank you and have a great rest of your day.